Well, this is what we were waiting for, ladies and gentlemen. The actual inflation data to be revealed. They've been saying, oh, inflation is down, it's around 3%. No, that's really not how you're supposed to measure inflation and the effect it has on everyday Americans. It doesn't make sense the way they're counting it. And this article just completely exposes Biden inflation soars to almost 19%. That seems a little bit more accurate, doesn't it, when it comes to the prices? You go to your grocery store, you go to a supermarket, yeah, the prices are up about 20% since the Trump era, and then they say, oh, it's the pandemic, it's because we shut down. Yeah, it's all the liberal lunatics who cried and told Trump to shut the government down and then blamed him for the bad economy. They gaslighted Trump. They said, you're killing everyone. You need to shut the country down. So he shut it down for a month. Obviously, the economy tanks because the country shut down. And then they run on the fact that the economy wasn't very good. And that's the reason why you should vote for Biden. It's total gaslighting. But now with Biden in office for almost 4 years, we've got crazy high inflation. And it's not 3% like they say it is. It's almost 19%. The real portrayal of the world's best economy. And that's what Biden's saying. Oh, the stock market's at a record high. Yeah, because you're printing money at a record rate. Of course it's going to be at a record high. They think they can get it by everyday Americans by saying, oh, look at the stock market, the record high. We're not that naive. We realize this stuff and we actually do some research. You can take a look at this article. It really does a great job of explaining it all. We are in an election year. Biden, a seasoned politician. Yeah, he's a seasoned politician. I think he's a burnt politician. It's like you put chicken on a grill and you leave it there. You forget about it for like 2 hours. That's where Biden's at in his political career. Has failed miserably in tackling inflation and is now attempting to shift blame for Bidenflation onto Trump, a move even noted by the New York Times, which dubbed it Biden's Plan B. And that has to do with the latest CPI data coming in higher than expected. Biden trying to explain it, saying, oh, we're better now than we were under Trump. But let's take a look under the hood. The dark reality of Bidenomics is at around 19% inflation under the president's watch, which is around 6% on an annual basis. When he took office, inflation was just 1.4%. Since March of 2021, it has stayed above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. That's a 37-month streak that Biden has going in the negative direction. Despite a decrease from the highs in mid-2022, that's what they're referencing, where the CPI was around 9%, now it's down to 3.5%. Many families continue to feel significant inflationary pressures. Prices have increased by almost 19%, while real wages have declined by 2.5%. Average hourly earnings from all employees dropped 2.5% to around $11 in March of 2024. And let's also understand another thing when they talk about the jobs that get created. Most of that is people taking second jobs to try and support themselves because of the terrible inflation. So imagine the gaslighting that's going on right now. They're trying to reference their great economy by citing, look at all the jobs we're creating, when in reality it's mainly overwhelmed Americans taking second jobs to try and support themselves because of how bad inflation is. Obviously, at this point, you're a young person, it's extremely hard to buy a home. You know, I've read you've got to be making around at least $100K, maybe even more than that, depending on what state you live in, to buy just a normal mid-size family home, especially if you've got, kids to deal with as well. When it comes to the CPI report, the government's consumer price index released on Wednesday shows a 3.5 year-over-year price increase from March of 23 to 24. The CPI rate had declined steadily for 12 consecutive months, coming off a 40-year high of 9% in June of 22 to 3% in June of 23. In July, it broke that run and increased to 3.2. Since then, it's moved sideways. Now, when you look at this model that they've created, they've developed a metric that uses February 2021, the month after President Biden's inauguration, as a base to measure the rate of change. All of the measurements are anchored to the base month of February 2021. And that's why the CPI is so useless, because it's a rolling data set. And the idea that, oh, if it goes from 3% inflation to 9% inflation back to 3%, we're back to where we were. That's not how inflation works. That's why the CPI is so useless. And this is more of an accurate measurement for how bad inflation has gotten under Biden. You can see it later talks about the CPI rate doesn't accurately capture Americans' inflation struggles. The official BLS CPI year-over-year increases will compare prices to already inflated basis in the coming month, and these statistics could mask the full impact. That's the problem. It's comparing the current situation to an already overinflated situation, which makes the CPI very hard to take seriously. And it comes out and says, oh, it's gone down from 9% to 3%. Yes, because you're comparing it to an already overinflated. You're not using a baseline. Like if the CPI came out and said this is what it is compared to where it was in February of 2021, that's more accurate. But no, it's comparing it how it was last year. But more and more people are starting to understand this and saying it doesn't really align. How is it 3% inflation when everything's up so much? No, it's about 20% inflation. That's the point. They're masking it. The 3% is the propaganda number. That really doesn't make any sense. Why would we compare a data set of numbers to an already overinflated situation, which is what they're doing with the CPI? And you can see this chart just completely exposes how out of control everything is with the new CPI they've done there on the right versus the one that gets reported. All items 3.5. The actual inflation based on when Biden came into the White House in early 2021, it's around 19%. And then they say, oh, it's the pandemic. Yeah, the pandemic was a real bad thing. Your answer to the pandemic, remember, was shutting the country down. If we would have had a Democrat president in 2020, early 2020 I'm talking, or actually any month in 2020, because technically Biden didn't take office until February of 2021. Trump was a lame duck for those few months. If we would have had any Democrat president, we would be in a catastrophic situation. They would have shut everything down. I mean, they were scared of their own shadows. They gaslit Trump. They said, you're killing people. You need to shut everyone. Remember what they said to DeSantis? Remember the DeSantis versus Newsom showdown? I mean, that was one of the biggest destructions I've ever seen. You would really think that would ruin Newsom's career, where Newsom comes out and says, you're killing everyone. It's Florida versus California. And then, with everything settled now, Florida is just booming. Their population increase is immense. They're going farther and farther to the right, and people are leaving California left and right. It got so bad with Newsom. I mean, the media got him to admit, yes, I'm going to, make California nice for when the communists from China come in. That's when I'm going to dress everything up, make everything nice, move all the drug addicts, the homeless out. And then when the communists leave, we're going to let it go, and it's going to be a complete hellhole again. And he just openly admitted that. You don't want to go off on Newsom, but you would think with any normal politician that would sink their career. He's actively admitting he's only cleaning up California because a communist leader is coming in. That's his motivation for cleaning up. It's not because American people want their cities and streets to look nice. No, but when the communist comes in and he actively admits it to the media, but nobody questions it, nobody cares, they still love Gavin Newsom. The Democrats do, and there are polls and people saying Gavin Newsom's probably going to run in 2028. I mean, there's a lot of people that wanted Gavin Newsom to take over for Biden in 2024, and the only reason he can't is because of the obsession the Democrats have with minorities, putting them in position of powers. If Gavin Newsom jumped Kamala Harris, that would be by their own definition viewed as racist. And these numbers are just completely out of control. And I was always wondering, why do the inflation numbers, why does the data never make sense? Well, now this is showing us what it actually is, and it's around 18 to 19%, and inflation is a major issue, and all of these graphs are just exposing Biden left on right on what the actual CPI is based off the change from February of 2021, which is when Biden entered office. The one that gets reported is basically comparing an already ridiculous inflation rate from the previous year to what it is this year, which is not an accurate representation of how you should compare inflation, especially when it comes to if we're doing a 4-year term, we're grading a president. Let's compare since you took office, how has it gone? We're not going to just focus on how much better is it from last year? Why would we do that? What if it got 30 times worse last year? Oh, so it's a little bit better from last year, but if it was already 30 times worse, it's still real bad. That's the problem with the way they report these inflation numbers. And then we also do have a few more polls coming out on this Saturday. We've got a general election. New York Times coming out admitting Trump +1. And this is also what we've seen. You see all these news articles and stuff where it's like, oh, Kennedy certainly helps Trump. Look, I don't know. Maybe Kennedy will end up helping Trump. I don't think he's going to hurt Trump, but I don't think it's this guaranteed like RFK is going to give Trump a free like 3 or 4 points by him being in the race. You know, like you see these polls back to back. It's not like Trump gains any points with RFK. Well, I guess that poll is kind of, yeah, I'm not sure I would take that poll seriously. That poll has RFK Jr. only getting 2 points and Weston Stein combining for two. I don't view that very accurate. Kennedy would get more than that. Even if it's just 5 or 6, he would get more than that. So yeah, that might not be the best poll to reference in terms of this. I think the big key for Kennedy, like we can look at these general election polls, but it just comes down to the swing states. It really does. Trump can lose the popular vote by 3, 4 points and still easily win this election. As long and honestly, I think Trump, even if he loses the popular vote, it's going to be very close because I don't think the turnout in New York or California is going to be like it was in 2020, where there was all this motivation to vote for Biden. And now we're getting all these numbers. Americans are waking up. They're realizing just how bad the inflation actually is. So when it comes to the election, I would say as long as Trump continues to lead in the swing states by about 3 or 4 points, that's a comfortable enough lead to feel relatively confident about the election. If it gets closer, you still have to give Trump the edge just because of the polling error and Democrats underperforming in terms of election years. We saw Hillary drastically underperform in 2016. We saw Biden underperform in 2020 in terms of not necessarily even the general popular vote. The polls had Biden up by 7. He only won by 4, so that's 3 points. He underperformed there, but also like the polls in Wisconsin and Michigan, you had polls with Biden up by 14, 15 points in October of 2020. He barely wins the state. It's obvious that the polls tend to favor Democrats outside of 2022, and obviously, there was an extenuating circumstance there. I think the Republicans would have done very well without Roe v. Wade being overturned in the summer of 22. And now here we are entering the summer of 2024, people thinking there's going to be another race incident. A lot of people, and even me included, we looked at a state like Minnesota and we saw BLM burn down Minneapolis. There were videos that I think have been scrubbed from the internet where, these reporters would come up and it was like the morning after all the riots in early June with the George Floyd stuff, and they would like take video of what Minneapolis looked like. And it looked like the equivalent of Austria after the 16th carpet bombing run by the Allies in 1945. That's how bad it was. But those people still vote for the people that did that to their city. BLM is a Democratic organization. They burned down all of Minneapolis. And then what does Minneapolis do? What does Minnesota do? They reward them. Yes, burn down our city, cause $2 billion in terms of total damage across the United States. Let's reward them. Yay, it's so smart. But people are waking up, guys. That's what I'm saying with this inflation stuff. The actual number's around 19%. It makes much more sense. Either way, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.